Alright, Chapter 4, Winning Strategy. Gamblers soon learn that through their experience with the game chance that they could run in such a way a certain percentage favors the one side with the expense of the other side. That if the game was played with sufficient number of times in the long run, winnings of favor side would generally be near a certain fixed percentage of the total amount of all the bets placed by the opponent. The modern gambling casino takes a side in its games that has proven in practice to be favorable. Necessary for the casino alters rules of the game so that the casino advantage is sufficient to cover the expense and also yield a desirable rate of profit capital that the owners have invested. The total amount of the bet placed is called action. For example, I place bets 3, 2, and $11. I have $60 worth of action. A player who has a certain amount of the capital can generally get many times the amount in action. Before ultimately losing his capital to the house, they contributed greatly to the excitement of the gambling. Failure to popular gambling systems. There has been an attempt to overcome the casino's advantage. Frequent approach has been varied amount of this bet play with the play accordingly to the various methods, some of which are simple, some of which are very complex. By illustration, the small martingale, better known as the doubling up system, the player makes an initial bet of $1. If he loses, he bets 2. Then he wagers 4, 8, and 16, so on, doubling his bet in each time until he wins. Then the process is repeated starting at $1 again. The bets placed following the string of losses equals the entire amount of loss within the string plus 1. Winning bet either is $1 bet and has been placed after a string of losses. Thus, each win results in a net profit of $1, counting just after the last win, and player keeps a winning dollar every few bets. However, the system has a flaw. The casinos always set a limit the amount that they may be bet. Suppose if the limit is $500, we have started at betting at $1. If there's a string of 9 losses, you're at $1, $2, $4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, 250. The next bet called for a doubling up system of $512. This bet is not permitted. It seems it's practice that the limits on the bets the casino won at the same percentage of the action as normal the wins, even though the player was using a double up system. Doubling up system provided no advantage whatsoever to the player. The other complicated betting schemes also seem to have the same flaw. It's no surprise that when it was later proven by mathematical theory of probability for most of the standard gambling games, no better scheme can ever be devised than will have the slightest effect upon the casino's long-run advantage. The games for which established fact included those games of mathematical called independent trials. Process, craps, roulettes, or such games. What this means, each play is a game influenced by the past outcomes, in turn no influence on the future outcomes. For example, such we shuffle the deck of the cards, draw one card, which happens to be 4 of the spades. We'll return the card into the deck and shuffle thoroughly. If we draw one card again, the chance of that will be 4 spades is no greater than or no less than the chance of it being any one of the other 51 cards. This fact has made popular the phrase, the cards have no memory. The importance of the dependence of the trial in blackjack. In the contrast previous situation, casino blackjack cards do not have memory. What happens is one round of play may influence what happens both and later in that round, succeeding rounds. Blackjack, therefore, may be exempt from the mathematical arguments which rule favorable gambling systems from independent trial games. Suppose, for example, that the 4 aces appear on the first round of the dealt from the thoroughly shuffled deck. After the round is over, the cards are placed face up on the bottom of the deck, and second round is dealt from the remaining unused cards. Now, in the second run, no aces can appear. There will be no blackjacks, no soft hands, no splitting aces. Splitting aces is highly favorable to the player. Situation having no aces in play, whichever is averaged almost 3% against the player, as what we shall see later. Continuous succeeding rounds until the deck is reshuffled, the aces are brought back into play. A few years ago, one casino made a practice of removing 4 10s and a 9 from the deck. For our calculation, we know this is adding 2.5% of the advantage. Deception was spotted in Nevada Gaming Control Board. The casino was brought to trial. Eventually, the casino's license was revoked. However, there was one ironic side light to the trial. The casino operators were practically men that through and through not all theoreticians. They knew that their short deck helped them, but they did not know how much. Thus, they had no answer for the damning the assertion of an expert witness that they were putting the player not at a 2.5% disadvantage, but at a 25% disadvantage. The use of favorable situations. Winning strategies to be given in this book depend largely on the fact that the composition of the deck changes during the play. The advantage of the black shaft will shift back and forth between players in casino. The advantage of other ranges between 10% on one side and the other on the occasion reaches 100%. What the cards are used up in the first round of play. The fact of these cards now missing from the deck will in general shift the house advantage. Up or down hands will be on the second round from now on depleted deck. The successive rounds continue to be dealt with increasing the depleted deck with the advantage shift back and forth between the player and the house. With large bets when the player has the advantage and very small bets when the house has the advantage. The result in this is that the player usually wins a majority of the large favorable bets, although he generally loses a majority of his small unfavorable bets as he considers net profit. Here's one very special example of a favorable situation that will be uncovered by a careful count of cards that are played. Suppose you were playing the dealer head-on. This means that you are the only player at the table. Suppose that you have the keeping of the careful trick of the cards played. You know that the unplayed cards from which the next round will be dealt consist precisely of 2s and 7s and 4s and 8s. 2, 7, and 4 8s. How much should you bet? Answer: place the maximum bet the casino will allow. Even borrow the money if you have to, for you are certain to win. If you simply stand on only 2 cards, you will be dealt. Here's the analysis. If you stand on your 2 cards, you do not bust, temporarily safe. When the dealer picks up his hand, he finds either a 7, 7, 7, 8, 8, 8, and since his total will be below 17, he must draw. If he holds on a 7, 7, there's no 7 left, so he will draw an 8 and bust. If he holds on 7.8 or 8, 8, he will bust if he draws either 7 or 8. The only choice is thus the dealer busts and you win. This brings us to a certain problem that I had solving the analysis of the game of blackjack. How can a player evaluate the depleted deck in general to determine whether or not it's favorable? It's favorable precisely how much so. This problem was solved by asking the IBM 704 high-speed electronic computer a series of questions. The questions was: suppose blackjack is played with a deck which only 4 aces are removed. Which is the best what is the best possible strategy for the player to follow, and what is the house or player's disadvantage? In other words, the computer was able to do exactly the same thing it had done in finding in the basics strategy, with one difference. It had to solve the problem with a deck from which 4 aces were missing. The result was noteworthy. When playing the deck that has 4 aces missing, the player has a disadvantage of 2.4.2%. Or in the best play, it may seem that the removal of the 4 aces should affect the matter so much more than the removal of any other 4 cards. Since ace plays such a unique role in the game, the essentials are natural or soft hands that make most favorable pairs. Whenever they appear, they seem to help the players. Thus, some players may suppose fluctuation in proportion of the aces in the deck, which have a greater effect on things in fluctuation in proportion of any other cards than we could simply study aces alone. However, we will see that aces alone are not overwhelmingly important. The computer was now asked to compute the player's advantage and disadvantage using the best strategy when playing the decks which were removed from thus 4 2s, 4 3s, etc. Result of these and some of the other special decks are listed in Table 4.1. Corresponding best strategies were computed that have been omitted to save space. Table 4.1 suggests shortage of cards having values 2 through 8 might be given the player an advantage, with a relative excess of such cards might hurt the player. Conservatively, the shortage of the 9, 10s, and aces ought to hurt the player, while an excess of them should help him. The variety of the winning strategy may be based on counting 1 or more types of cards. A good example of winning strategy is based on counting 5s. It will be described in detail in the rest of the chapter. The reader who finds the basic strategy in Chapter 3 difficult should plan to adopt the 5-count strategy at this first winning approach to the game. On the other hand, the reader who learned the basics strategy promptly should plan to use his point count strategy at the next chapter at this first winning approach to the game. It offers many advantages over the 5-count strategy, while only moderate increase the level of difficulty. These readers probably should not spend a great deal of time practicing a 5-count strategy. However, since variation and discussion is the remainder of the chapter, are important in later strategies. It should still be thoroughly read and understand by those who are going on the more powerful strategies. The first winning strategy is counting fives. Table 4-1 shown on 4 cards. One that's shown that 4 cards of one kind are removed from the deck. The greatest ship of the relative advantage of the player house is caused by removing the 4 fives from the deck. The effect is greater than when 4 aces are removed. More important, removing the fives again is advantage of 3.6 to the player. Now suppose that you depleted the deck contains now no fives, but does contain enough cards for the next round of play. Therefore, no fives will appear during the next round. It can be shown that this situation may be considered as mathematically identical with those that arise when hands are dealt from a deck which is completely except when the 4 fives have been removed. Without attempting to give a detailed explanation for this, we simply point out that this means if the player knows that there are no fives can appear on the next round of play, if he then follows what we shall call the 5-count strategy on the round of play, he will enjoy a 3.6% edge then given in the table 4-1. The 5-count strategy is given in the table 4-2. Is in table 3-5. Observe the 5-count strategy very similar to the basic full deck strategy, which ceases to burden one's memory. In particular, note that the soft standing numbers are the same. All basic doubling down situations also doubling down when the fives are gone. And the same statement is true for pairing splitting, except that the pair of sixes is not split against the dealer's up card of a 7. Alright, this shows you're playing the disadvantage of special decks, descriptions, description of deck, advantages in percent. As a matter of fact, when all the fives are gone, it is perfectly acceptable to use only changes in hard standing numbers, otherwise play according to the basic strategy. The errors introduced primarily involving neglect the split pairs, double down in several instances. Their effect is quite small, but the player's advantage is decreased to 3.6 to 3.4%. I suggest this is decreased the load on your memory. We shall adopt this and simplified 5 strategies in all our calculations, discussions on the fives method. We now outline a simple method of winning at the casino blackjack, being and making a small bets using standard strategy, watch the cards that are played and keep track of the fives. When you see that all 4 of them have been used, check to see that the next round of play will come entirely from a remainder of the deck and that thus no fives will appear. Now you must place your bet before any of these cards that are dealt in the next round. However, you know that you have a better than 3% average advantage whatever you bet. Therefore, place a bet that is large in comparison to the ones you have been placing. When the cards are dealt, employ the simplified 5 strategies. We have been recommended that if the fives are used up before a certain round is dealt, the player should make a large bet, usually simplified 5 strategy. Now it happens that some of the fives remain when in a round of play begins It may happen that some fives remain when a round play begins, then that all of them appear during that round. In an instant this happens, the player should change to a simplified 5 strategy. For example, suppose he has dealt a hard 7 and the dealer shows a 2. Suppose that when a player draws, he receives the last remaining 5. He now has a hard 12. The basic strategy says to draw, however, the 5 strategies now applies, and according to it, he should stand. This is to consider a refinement and is not essential for winning with 5 strategies. It improves the player's chance of winning some of the small bets, namely some of those placed beginning on the round in which the last 5s appeared. Suppose you continue over many deals to place the large bets with a quantity of $5 at 0. Small bets otherwise. When the quantity of 5s is equal to 0, the situations which were made were larger bets, you win in the long run a rate about 3%. With your small bets, you lose a rate about 0.2%. If the large bets are big enough compared to the small bets, if the favorable situation occurs often enough, the profits from the big bets should be both offset losses from small bets and leave comfortable overall profit. Alright, there are several questions which must now answer in detail in order to make our instructions complete. How can you tell whether the remaining cards will adequately for the next round of play? How often do favorable situations arise? How larger than small bets should the larger bet? How fast will we make money? How much risk is there? How much capital is required to start? And we will take these up in order and listed. Alright, counting cards. The check, counting the cards. The check is whether to do the remaining cards are adequate can be made in several ways. The surest way is to actually count how many cards have been used in play. For example, after each run, you might say to yourself something like, 11 cards have been played and I have seen only 5. Count every card that has been used and played, but only count 5 that you have seen. For example, if a card is burned, be sure to count it if whether or not you see it. What is, it's not necessary that you see every card that is used in play. However, you may see missing any of the playing cards. Some of them may be 5s, in which case you miss favorable situations. For example, suppose if after a certain round you see the 17 cards have been played, that there are 3 5s that have been used. Suppose that also 5s have been burned. That a 5 has been burned, that you do not know this, then as far as you know, 1 5 may yet appear. So you'll make a small bet, miss the opportunity of exploiting a favorable situation. If the dealer habitually conceals a burned card, you may wish to request that he show it to you. It is sometimes difficult to know whether to make this request. It should not be made if you think that it will arouse the casino suspicious that you are playing one of our winning strategies, for they may make countermeasures that are more costly to you than not seeing the burned card. If the casino does not use the last card, incorporate this into your count from the beginning. The reason for this is the particular count, when subtracted from 52, is supposed to give the number of the cards yet to be played. Table 4-3 is roughly a guide as when your remaining cards will fail to be adequate for the next round. Counting the use of cards, other advantages besides telling the player whether the unused cards are adequate for the next round. First, training in the card counting is preparation for the most powerful and also more difficult winning systems are presented in succeeding chapters. Second, the count is an invaluable asset in the detection of cheating, because a common device is to remove one or more cards from the deck. One might wonder at this point whether the casino has tried adding cards to the deck, or when 2 or more decks are being used. This can be done easily. I have only seen it done once when one deck was in use. That was risky. Imagine the shock and the fury of a player who picks up his card and sees that not only are both his cards 5s, but they're also both spades. Another well-known method of cheating, which can often be detected by a card counter, is called the turnover. Though the name is apt, the experience is not a dessert treat. In a week from a form of turnover, the dealer watches to see whether his first half of the deck seems to be in favor of the house strongly. If it does not, he continues normally, hoping that the later half will. However, if the dealer does favor the house during the first half, he secretly turns the deck over so that the used cards on the top are replayed during the second half. In the strong form of turnover, the dealer stacks the used cards from the first half of the deck as he picks up after they play. When the deck is half used, he turns it over and deals the stacked hands. The unwary player generally does not remember which cards he has just seen. However, if he used a portion that contains number other than 26 cards, the total deck will seem to one who counts cards to contain twice the numbers. His portion instead of 52 cards. So further than if the used portion is 26 cards, the fraud may be detected unless it also contains 2 5s. For the number of 5s in the total deck also seems to be the one who is counting them twice the number in the used portion. For the reader who does not want to count the used cards, for this less satisfactory method to determine about how many cards remain to be placed, it can be used if the dealer checks to see how near the end of the deck he is. He does this by pushing the low card slightly forward so that the upper edges of all the cards show slightly, then uses the used cards which face appear wider than the unused cards, provided unused cards which are face down does not have borders to make their edges white. Also, the relative thickness of the two portions make it easy to estimate the number of unused cards remaining. If the deck without borders, place a portion of the deck face up underneath the remainder, then skew the deck and pushing the bottom card forward slightly. Then there should be a clear line demarcation between the two portions. From there, you can estimate the amounts in each portion. In little practice, you can become quite skillful. If you attempt the same thing with a deck having the borders, it's harder, since the clear line of demarcation usually does not appear. Here's a warm-up experiment that can be done with any deck if you convince you that estimating the number of the cards on the portion of the deck is not difficult. First square of the deck by striking its edge against a smooth tabletop. Now try breaking the deck into two equal portions. If necessary, transfer cards from one portion to the other until they appear equal. Do not place two stacks side by side on the tabletop. Match their height. There would be destroyed for the purpose of the experiment, which is to introduce you to estimating by eye alone. After a few attempts, you will find rarely that if you ever are off more than two cards, many people assume to learn to divide the deck into two precisely equal parts almost every time. An improvement by fives method. Suppose you keep a track only of the number of fives remaining, but also told the number of the remaining unseen cards. Then you can estimate whether or not the deck is 5 rich or 5 poor. One way to divide the number is U for unseen cards by the number F of the unseen fives. Normally, unseen cards number the numbers unseen fives is 13. If the unknown cards and unknown fives is greater than 13, the deck is 5 poor. In extreme cases, if the F is equal to 0, that is when the deck has no fives and the unseen and 5 cards does not make a sense, but you already know what to do then. For large unseen and fives, large gear edge out with the unseen and over fives is 26, for example. The edge is about 1.9%. Half of 0.13% of the 3.58%. You should bet on 2 or 3 units. The unseen or fives is less than 13. The deck is 5 rich, and the casino has the advantage. You should make small bets. The advantage using unseen and fives is that you should find and exploit many additional favorable situations. The method works without changing against any number of decks. Frequency of favorable situations, rate at which money won depending on how favorable situation arises, influenced by how many players at the table. This dependence is shown in Table 4. Clearly strengthens the player's advantage when he is using 5 strategies to play in games which there are no more than 5 players. Variations in bet sizes. The instinctive answer to the question, how much larger than a small bet should be larger bet B? As large as possible for as large variable bets as reasonable for the profit. However, there are some circumstances that need to be considered. And then, if a player goes along steadily betting $1, then suddenly everyone once in a while bets $500. How may he soon be object to study by casino operators? If he is winning, he is very likely to take countermeasures. One simple effective method is shuffling the deck after the player has made a large bet before any of the cards are dealt. Although the player can then remove his large bet in favorable situations that is destroyed. Thus, it might seem judicious to reduce the size of the bet variation level that does not attract some attention. First edition of Beat the Dealer has made the casino very costly. Consequently, large bets should be no more than 3 to 4 times the size of a smaller bet. Let's run the simple calculation and see how costly this is. Suppose we are playing 100 hands per hour ahead on the dealer. Then, according to Table 4.4, there are about 9.8 favorable situations at 3.4% in favor of the player, and about 90.2 unfavorable ones of 0.2% in favor of the house. If we're betting one in $500, we lose 2 ten thousandths by 90 times 1, or 180, or $1 or 18 cents on unfavorable situation. Gains of 0.34 thousandths times 10 and $500 is 170. On the favorable situation, net profit of $169 $169 instead we bet $125 on favorable situation and lose $22.50 in this instance, but would again win $107 on favorable situation from a net profit of $147.5. It should be emphasized that these profit figures are rough averages amount very large number of hands. In any brief series of a few hundred hands, there will very likely be considerable deviations from these figures. We can now use the figures to estimate the average hourly wage of the 5 system. Suppose that we are playing head-on rate of 100 hands per hour. We saw previously that we average $140 per hour when our bets range from $125 to $500. Therefore, we should make $5.60 per hour when we bet $5 to $20. The player who only bets 50 cents or $2 will make a minus 56 cents per hour. One skilled player who I know asserts that he can play 350 hands per hour when playing head-on and betting from $1 to $500, and he would average 170 times 3.5%, or about $595 per hour. It's system players' best interest to play rapidly. When the more players are present, fractions of the hand are favorable dwindles. Furthermore, since it takes longer to play out the round, each player gets fewer hands per hour. Capital required, extent of the risk, and rate of the profit. Well, we know the answer to the question: how much capital is required to start, how much risk is there, what is the average rate of profit. First, you decide how much your initial capital will be. You must never play the money that it will hurt you to lose. Besides the usual arguments against this, there is one or more playing with the money you cannot afford to lose produces psychological disintegration and bad play, consequently a greater chance of the defeat. Conversely, playing the money that means little to you leads to cold confidence and devastating accurate play. Now you have got to make a stake on a seasonable level. Next, you must decide how small to make their chance of ever losing to your entire stake. For any stake, the player has many choices to play. Boldly takes a large chance of being ruined. You make a comparatively large amount per hour. Instead, the player may divide his stake into so many units that there is virtually no chance to lose at all. But the price paid for this considerable reduction is an average profit. As an induction of what to expect, some of the small bets of the 1 unit are where a unit is amount determined by you, the player. Some of the big bets are 3 units, where then we'll stake 150 units, where the chances are less than 1 in 10 that you will ever lose your stake. There are more than 9 in 10, and the capital will grow indefinitely, and you stake is only 75 units. Your chance is about 3 in 1. Eventually losing it 7 to 10 if you continue to grow as long as you care to play on. Before you get in learning practical winning strategies, we take the next chapter to describe the original casino test, and first of these strategies, the now famous 10-count method.